Oh, Metal Summoners. It is so great to see you guys as always. It is midweek. It's your Island of Misfit Toys. We are starting the weekend on Wednesday, just like we like to do. There's nothing like a good start of the weekend mixed with a happy hump day. I feel like that's kind of the best way to get things done here on TMS, here on the Metal Summit. As always, we appreciate you guys. We've got Angel Alamo. We've got the real Psycho Steve. Bobby Dreyer is always on Bobby Dreyer time, but we are super duper stoked to always have you guys. And we are super duper stoked and honored to have our good friend joining us this evening. For all of you friends and fans that supported us on our recent trip out to Philadelphia a couple years ago, when myself and Steve hosted the Masquerade Festival with Angel there doing press as well and Bobby doing the Bobby Dreyer photography thing, then you would have seen this man DJing it up between sets in only the way that he knows how to do. But Brooklyn's own, from L'Amour's, from Masquerade, and from our family, Alex Kayne. How are you, brother?
All right, my brother. It's good to be here, man. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so happy to have you, man, and thank you so much, man. First and foremost, how's 2023 been treating you?
Yeah, it's everything is slowly coming back. The lockdown just basically wiped everybody's job off the planet. For the better part of 2 years, but things have been coming back now lately. For a while, it was a little difficult to get gigs, but there are more bands coming around now. There's more tours. There's more of everything. So luckily for me, more opportunities for me to do shows. So I'm grateful.
Absolutely, man, 100%. And when it comes to you not being out doing shows, talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing with the Slaughterhouse.
Yeah, it was a great 98 episode, 4-year run on the Slaughterhouse. We interviewed everybody from Rob Halford to the Burning Witches and everybody in between. And what I loved about Gimme Metal was they just gave you free reign to play whatever you want, say whatever you want. I would build my shows from my collection of vinyl. I would pull stuff out and curate stuff from my collection to play for everyone. And there were fans from all over the world. It's unfortunate that Gimme Metal is unable to continue.
Yeah.
At this point, so the Slaughterhouse will be looking for a new home. I mean, the show will never die.
Absolutely.
But it was a lot of fun because, like I said, Gimme Metal was a great business model. There was a tip jar. They had a lot of bands that would take over, and you could get into the chat room and talk directly to the bands, and you could actually tip them and buy merch. So instead of like a streaming Spotify thing where they get paid a half a penny every time that somebody listens to a song, it was a little bit different. It was about building a community. I wish it would continue, but unfortunately, they don't have the funds to keep the station running. So I have to find some place to put the Slaughterhouse. I've had a few things on the table, but I'll let everybody know when that happens.
Absolutely, man. 100% for sure. So let's kick things off and get right into the early days. Let's start things off with L'Amour's. Why don't you tell everybody what L'Amour's was for anybody who doesn't know about it, and how you got involved.
Well, L'Amour opened up as a discotheque in Brooklyn, in the heart of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. If you've ever seen the movie Saturday Night Fever, then you know what the Bensonhurst neighborhood is, because that's basically what Brooklyn was like back then. And so, disco was dominating the world, and L'Amour opened as a discotheque, and it was really strange how a couple of Italian guys from Brooklyn wound up owning the most famous heavy metal club in the universe. It was one of those things that was really unlikely. When you look at the early days, the first performer was Gloria Gaynor, and she sang her famous hit "I Will Survive." The first night that the club was open. There was a rock scene going on. The club opened in '78, so this was near the end of the decade where the tides were turning a little bit. They had that anti-disco rally at that stadium in Chicago somewhere that year, and the genre was kind of oversaturated and kind of on its way out. And it was a good time for a rock and roll club to start. And they were having trouble with some of the kids, the disco kids in the building. They were having fights and stuff like that. So they started doing rock on Thursday nights. They called it concert night. And it started, it was a slow build, 20, 30 people, whatever, and cover bands. But the scene there started to turn. Like I said, the decade, the scene was starting to shift. The rock nights became more and more popular. It was, started like 20, 30 people. Then all of a sudden, the next week, it was 50 people. Then it was 80 people. Then it was 150 people. Then 300 people. And it was one of those things that was almost like a tidal wave. The owners were pleasantly surprised, and they said, well, let's turn Friday into rock too. We'll do Thursday and Friday. So it spilled over into Friday nights, and that was the signal that the weekend dance nights were doomed. If they were only doing dance on Saturdays. So when that happened, they finally, when Thursday and Friday got crowded, they were like, well, screw it. Let's just do a whole weekend. We'll just go rock. We'll become a rock club.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, more or less how it happened. They were sort of blindsided by this underground rock community that was looking for a real place to hang out. And they found it there in Brooklyn. And the cool thing about that was Brooklyn's right in the center between Long Island, which had a big rock scene, and New Jersey, which had a rock scene going on. So you could come right into the middle and hang out at Lemoore. So that's kind of how it started. And then over the next 10 years, the club started to gain a lot of prestige, bringing in some of the early bands like Metallica, Wasp, Armored Saint, Angel Witch, Girl School, Rock Goddess, Motorhead, Twisted Sister. A lot of the early bands played there. Anvil, new wave of British heavy metal people. We had come over. The Rods were really popular from upstate New York. And so there was this brand new scene. People before that were listening to Judas, not Judas Priest, but they were listening to Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple kind of mode. They were in that mode. And when the new wave of British heavy metal washed up on the shores of the United States, which is around 1981, 82, that was like a brand new day for rock and rollers. When they heard this music, it was like a new sun came up. This heavy metal is here. You know what I mean? This is like this is brand new. So coinciding with the club turning rock, which is around 1981, more or less, the new wave of British heavy metal hitting the shores and this rock scene converging in Brooklyn, it was the perfect storm. It really was the perfect storm. So, and that's how the club got famous. They started writing reviews. People, the press came in, started writing show reviews, and those wound up in the magazines all over the world, Kerrang, Hammer, and Metal Hammer, and all that stuff. And people realized, hey, this is the place that to go to in New York, on the East Coast, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. When you take a look in New York, besides Lemoore's, like you said, and filling us in on how that built to be such a heavy rock and metal scene, for people that are into like rock music, you also had CBGBs, which was, based around really kind of the punk explosion. From your experience, of course, was there or any type of rivalry when it came to that kind of stuff? Or was it kind of like a brotherhood where it was like, well, you focus on this and we focus on this, but it's all about just the rock world in general? Like, how do you look back on kind of CBGBs versus Lemoore, if there was a versus?
Yeah, there really wasn't a versus. It was more like they were two separate entities very early on. CBGBs had already been dominating the punk and hardcore scene for, since the late 70s, before Lemoore was even born. So CBGBs had already established a dominance in that. But they did have some metal bands there. I mean, AC/DC played there in 78 or 79. And so there was a smattering of rock and metal there. But pretty much it was two different things. They had Blondie on the weekends. We had Motorhead. and it was kind of two different crowds, really. And the Sunday matinees at CBGB's was really the thing that exploded there. They did Sunday hardcore matinees in the afternoon that were extremely crowded. And about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years down the road, Lemoore started copying that. They opened on Sundays and did hardcore matinees. So there was a connection there. They started booking more and more hardcore bands in the 90s and in the aughts. And so they decided to do a Sunday matinee as well. At that point, CBGB's was probably already closed.
Gotcha.
But it was pretty much two different things. And the city, Brooklyn, all the outer boroughs are pretty much, nobody cares about them. The city is the city. Manhattan is the city. When all of these shows were happening at Lemoore, and there were 2,500 people in the club, nobody was writing about that in the newspapers in the city. All they were worried about was who was at CBGB's and Max's Kansas City. They had no idea what was happening in Brooklyn. Like trainloads of kids were getting off the subway and coming to the club. And there were 2,000, 2,500 screaming metalheads every weekend.
Yeah.
For a long, long time. And they finally, the city finally woke up in like 1985. All of a sudden, Studio 54, let's do metal on Wednesdays. Studio 54 had the Exodus, Venom, and Slayer show, which was cool. But yeah, they came around a couple of years later. But like I said, CBGB and Lemoore were two separate entities.
Gotcha. Absolutely, man. For sure. Before I kick it up to Angel to bring him on some time and bring in some of the Metal Summoners and your fans as well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how you became involved and became the house DJ of Lemoore's?
Well, I was there for my residency lasted from late 1981 until late 1984. And then after that, I went over to Lemoore East. Worked there for a while, and I came back to Brooklyn, and there was Chuck, the other DJ, was working there. And so I backed him up, and then I worked there on and off until the club closed in 2004. The way I got involved was I had been a DJ my entire life. I was a disco DJ when I was a teenager, doing block parties and stuff like that. And I won a battle at a DJ's mixing contest at a club called Night Gallery in Brooklyn. I beat 15 other DJs from around the borough in mixing skills. And so word spread around pretty quickly. I started getting work in all of the local clubs in Brooklyn, which was great because I didn't have to carry around my equipment anymore. I didn't have to do a mobile thing anymore, set up, break down, and just walk in the club and start playing. So working in clubs, I probably worked in 7 or 8 clubs before I got the gig at Lemoore. The DJ there before me, when the club was a disco, his name was Mike Pace, and he was a really good friend of mine. We had both chewed up some of the same DJ booths together back in the day, in the late 70s. And he was working there. And when the club started to turn rock, he was a very well versed disco DJ, but he knew nothing about rock. So he asked me to borrow records. He would borrow my records. I would take a couple of records with me to the club. Here, play this, play that. Put this on. So then when the club turned metal, he wanted to graduate from being a DJ to a club owner. So he got an opportunity to run a club called the Brooklyn Zoo. And he left, and I was the logical choice. I was a friend of his. I was already a professional DJ. I had already had a massive collection of metal records. So I was the obvious choice. He's like, hey, do you want to take over? I'm going to be running the zoo. I was like, sure. So that's kind of how it started.
Oh man, that's awesome. And what were your first metal records?
Man, that's hard to say. It's I started listening to metal. As soon as the new wave of British heavy metal hit, it was bands like Tank and Tigers of Pantang. Was one of my first two albums, Tigers of Pantang. The Angel Witch LP, I remember getting my hands on. Motorhead early on because they were around in 1979, 1980. The first Iron Maiden album, the Killers album. So then there was a band called Dust that I was very heavily into. I'm sure you know who they are.
Yeah.
They were around in 78, 79. So it was like late 70s stuff, Budgie, the Left End, stuff like that, coupled with new wave of British heavy metal, Scorpions, some of the bigger bands that had already been there, Scorpions, AC/DC, Maiden, Rock Goddess, stuff like that, Lee Aaron, very early stuff. Although those the furthest back I can remember. And then I just bought everything I saw, after a while. But when I started at Lemoore, I had around 600 albums, which is pretty good, enough to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely do a lot with 600 albums before you start getting close to double playing, triple playing songs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I try not to play the same thing twice. And then back then there were a lot of cassettes floating around too. You guys know that there was a big cassette trade in game happening back then. And I got a hold of some of the early cassettes too. I had the Metallica cassette.
I was just going to ask if you got that, like an OG copy.
I got an OG copy. Unfortunately, it was stolen out of the DJ booth. But I did have. I had that. I actually played it at the club. Biohazard's cassette, Typo Negative stuff, Overkill, Power in Black. I was one of the first guys to play that.
Oh, hell yeah.
Those early records coupled with those early demos, it was the foundation on which the club would be built.
Yes. Absolutely, man. 100%. Angel, my good man, let's kick it over to you. How are you doing this evening?
My man.
I'm doing very awesome. Thank you for your time, Alex. It's hard to believe BLE was 9 months ago.
I know.
It's great to be here, man.
If you could share, just if you could share any memories. We know that White Lion played at the club in Brooklyn. I wonder if you can share any memories of those early White Lion shows. And when they're a band that then you kind of looked at and knew those guys are going to make it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you about White Lion first. First time I saw Mike Tramp, he came over to the States with his own band called Lion. And they played, I think they were opening for Dreamer, which was Vito Brada's band at the time. Okay.
Oh, wow.
It was like a Thursday night. So Mike Tramp comes out with this leather. He has like this eye patch on his face. It looked like a pair of leather glasses, but they were studs. There were spikes sticking out on it. And he couldn't see, So he came out onto the middle of the stage and he stood still for like the first 10 minutes because he knew if he took any steps, he might fall off the stage because he was completely blind. But he was wearing these cool, glasses that had studs sticking out of him. So the band Lion was pretty good. And Mike ran into Vito Brada a few days later at the club. And I think the story goes they were both backstage. Vito came backstage and Mike and his band had played. And Vito came backstage and picked up one of the guitars and just started fooling around on it. And Mike Tramp was like, holy shit, this is the guy. This is my guy. He sent his band home and he stayed in the United States. And him and Vito hooked up and started writing songs. And that's the very beginnings of White Lion happened right there backstage at the club. A few years later, when they put out the first album, the Lemoore owners formed a management company called Loud and Proud, and they managed White Lion. They allowed White Lion to rehearse in the club while it was closed during the day. So they got the full experience of being on a live stage with the whole production, all their amplifiers, the club sound, and they were able to rehearse their live shows there 3 or 4 times a week during the day.
Nice.
Damn. It just makes you wish you was back. You was there back then when it happened. I mean, just kind of seeing Vito meeting Mike Tramp and just seeing how their careers took off together, writing some awesome songs with White Lion.
Yeah. At this point, they don't want to have anything to do with each other. But they, and I was one of the first DJs. I mean, they gave me, the owners of the club were managing the band. They handed me the test pressing of Fight to Survive.
Oh.
I played it first before anybody. I still have it. It's here somewhere. And then Eddie Trunk played it on the radio. And he kind of started that little firestorm of White Lion when he put it on the radio, and it started getting very popular. A lot of other stations picked it up. And they went on from there. I think their first tour was opening for Triumph shortly after that. But they were a house band. They must have done 30 or 40 shows at Lemoore, as headliners. So they were, very special to us.
They still are to this day, to a lot of us.
Yeah. Mike's coming. I'm doing a show with him. He's coming to the States. I'm doing a show with him on Long Island on May 3rd. He's doing the songs of White Lion. It's just him and a guitar player, and they have drums and bass on tape. So a full band will be coming out of the speakers, but it'll just be him and his partner.
Oh, nice. He's playing M3 2 days later.
Yeah.
In Columbia, Maryland. Are you coming down for M3, Alex?
I might. I may have the time off. If I'm not gigging, I'll be down there.
Sweet.
And then I think you asked me about bands that I knew, that I saw, that I knew was going to be great right off the bat. The Black Crowes opened up for Junkyard. Believe it or not. The Black Crowes were pretty much unknown out of Atlanta. And the Shake Your Money Maker album wasn't out yet, but it was about to drop like a month or two later. And I heard them, the opening notes of Twice as Hard or whatever. And I was like by the back bar having a beer or something. And I heard it. I just stopped in my tracks. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I walked to the front and I enjoyed the show. I'm like, these guys are going to be huge. 6 months later, they were on top of the world. They practically saved rock and roll single-handedly in 1990. I mean, there was no other band that sounded like that.
No, not in 1990. No, we were stuck with Vanilla Ice.
Yeah,
unfortunately. So thank God for the Black Crowes in 1990.
You had Pearl Jam, you had the Red Hot Chili Peppers and all of that stuff running around. The guys with the cargo pants, stomping around the stage in their work boots. Here comes the Black Crowes playing rock and roll. It was like a breath of fresh air.
So now I'm going to go to the famous fan questions. Brian wants to know: did you roller skate to work?
What was that?
Did you roller skate to work?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. Did I do what?
Did you roller skate to work?
Did I roller skate to work?
I think it's a disco reference.
Well, I spun. Yeah, if she's talking about bounce, skate, roll, yeah, I played that song.
Oh no, I think he's saying because it started as like a disco club. I think he's having some fun. Like, did you like roller skate to work?
Yeah, no, I didn't spin any disco at Lemoore, but I worked at a club called Heat in New York City before Lemoore. That was a bona fide discotheque, ground floor of a warehouse, 3,000 people. And I spun a lot of disco there. Yeah, I did work at United Skates though, the roller rink.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I worked at both of them. There were 2 rinks in Brooklyn. There was 1 rink in Queens, and I was the head DJ. I used to schedule all the other DJs, their schedules. And so I did work at a roller rink, so that's close enough.
And another question from Brian: what band that never played there do you wish had actually played?
Oh, well, that's a great question, man. I would have loved to have Ronnie James Dio, man. That would have been fantastic, man. He played the Birch Hill, and we were so jealous. I don't know how they got that gig. Birch Hill was a club in Jersey. But we would love to have had Ronnie James Dio. But he got so famous. He was already famous. He shot right past the mid-sized clubs. I mean, they were too small at that point. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen Pearl Jam play, but they didn't want to play the club because it had the heavy metal stigma attached to it. They didn't want to do a metal club. But if they had done their homework, they would have realized that Cheap Trick, Alvin Lee, Pat Travers, Steppenwolf, Allman Brothers, they all played there. We covered everything. I mean, we were famous for metal. But a lot of bands came through the door that were rock and roll bands. Blue Oyster Cult, Kiss played there. So if they had done their homework, they might have changed their minds. But the Dio for sure. I saw him at the Spectrum, but I would have loved to have seen him in a smaller room like that. Nice up and close. Would have been great.
Yeah. Another question from Brian, who's a New York hardcore fan. Cool stories about a hardcore show.
Yeah, well, the one that comes to mind is it wasn't exactly a hardcore show. It was Agnostic Front and Exodus, which is like two worlds colliding. All right. Skinheads versus the long hairs. There were fights from 62nd Street to 63rd Street outside the club the entire night. It was a crazy melee, and because like, it was one of the first times a real bona fide hardcore band and a metal band were on the same bill at the club. And the skinheads and the long hairs didn't really understand each other right off the bat. Years later, it all calmed down. But in the beginning, it was like, the skinheads would mosh and stuff. They'd bang into a long hair guy, and he would go, "What the hell is that?" And he'd try to hit him. Like, didn't understand what moshing was, or at least the way the hardcore guys did it. And so there was a lot of fighting at first. But then after a while, the more and more shows and more hardcore bands became the center of attention at the club, especially in the 90s. So that all calmed down after a while, and everybody got along. But I'll never forget that night. There was I don't know, there was the whole out, and they were smart enough to do all the fighting outside the club instead of inside. So, but it was a crazy melee going on that night. But both bands were great. They were fantastic, and I really thought that they actually kind of fit on the bill, even though it was odd, but it worked somehow. So that's there was always a firestorm when the Cro-Mags played. They always sold out the club, and there were bodies flying all over the place, elbows, feet, bodies. It looked like there was a catapult in the middle of the floor. Bodies flying all over the place.
This is how much fun we had without cell phones.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for that. There was a lot of stuff going on in that club that had it been documented, we might have closed a lot earlier. Instead of 2004, we might have closed in 1984.
I can imagine seeing somebody in the mosh pit with a cell phone.
Yeah. Well, back then, the mosh pits were a lot more violent. You see these videos on TikTok and on Twitter and on Instagram and stuff of these guys swinging in the air and all this kind of stuff. Like, that's the way it was in Lemoore. There were guys that were putting razor blades in between their fists, and they would cut you so fast you wouldn't even know why you were bleeding. When they did the swinging their arms around. The pit was a serious place, and you had to really sort of like, you had to know what you were doing, and you had to know what you were in for. I remember there was one girl told me the story about, I wasn't there this particular night. One girl told me about a guy who put a cue ball into a sock and was swinging it around in the mosh pit, and people were coming out like this looking for their teeth.
Oh my God.
These kids today wouldn't last 5 seconds in a pit like that. It just wouldn't happen, So yeah, it was it was pretty crazy stuff that went on back then.
Yeah, and Brian can definitely confirm this. My first pit, I took a sock full of change to the face.
Yeah, see, that's another one. They would put the poor quarters in there or something, swinging around. It's dangerous stuff, man. But it's like you went through at your own risk. That's what moshing is all about. It's just like skiing. You might get killed, but it's a risk.
I'm going to go to a cool question from Jules. She wants to know, what song is guaranteed to get everyone engaged?
Well, that depends on what night it is. If it's a trash night, and you throw on War Ensemble by Slayer, that'll get the crowd will start moshing even before the band gets on the stage. So that's one of them. We professional DJs, we call those magnets. A magnet is a track that draws people onto the floor. So for a hardcore night, it would be "We Gotta Know" by the Cro-Mags, or "Hard Times" was something that would guarantee a mosh pit to happen. Straight ahead rock and roll nights, except "Fast as a Shark" is probably the closest thing you're going to get to a thrash track on that kind of night. So Fast as a Shark was one of the more popular tracks at the club when I played that. And I played that very early on before moshing was even invented. Where people were jumping around and stuff. It was the closest thing to moshing that you could see before it actually was invented. So Fast as a Shark, War Ensemble, Hard Times by the Cro-Mags, that kind of stuff always gets people interested.
And I'm going to get to a question from Jules. Have you ever DJ'd a high school event?
I did, yes. It was a long time ago. It's a funny story with it, too. There's always a funny story, right? This was a Catholic high school that my aunt was part of the PTA, whatever the hell. I was just when I was a disco DJ. They hired me to do their prom. So I'm on the stage, and everybody's dancing, having a good time. The kids are all having a good time. And somebody came up to request a song, and while they were requesting the song, they spilled their soda into my mixer.
Oh, no.
All right, so I just hoped and prayed that the mixer would hold out, but of course it didn't. 3 songs later, everything stopped, and the kids started shouting, "Kill the DJ, kill the DJ, kill the DJ."
Oh, no.
All right, I don't have a backup mixer. So no cell phones, no nothing, right? I had a friend who lived a few blocks away that was a DJ. I got in the car, drove to his house. He wasn't home. Well, his mother was there, and she knew me. I was like, I'm in a jam. I'm DJing at Bishop Ford High School, and my mixer is dead. Can I borrow Anthony's mixer? She's like, all right. She gave it to me because she knew I was in trouble. Drove back, plugged back in, got everybody dancing again, and then the night, and then everybody, a good time was had by all.
Nice. Damn kids.
First and last high school event.
I don't blame you. Killed the DJ, like killed the virgin.
Kill the DJ. I remember it was just like, it's like it wasn't my fault. Somebody spilled, liquid into my mixer. That's
Seriously, wasn't that in like a Smith song?
It's entirely possible because it happens a lot.
That's funny.
We were doing Winger. We were set to do Winger at Stage 48 in New York, and somebody spilled a drink into the board, the Midas board, right? The Midas board.
Man. You sure it wasn't Mike Judge?
Yeah, it might have been. What is the Midas board? $42,000 board, right? $50,000 board. It went out and it never came back on.
Oh, yeah, only a couple of dollars there.
Right, no mains. So we had to move the entire show. We had to close the club, move the entire show a couple of weeks down the road. But a little bit of liquid like that irresponsibly can destroy the entire evening.
Yeah, I don't know why Mike Judge had to do that.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he was the one.
Me neither. But no, it was you, Mike.
It's crazy though with technology changing over years. Sorry, Angel. Let me just get this thought out real quick. It's just interesting how technology changed over the years because there's a well-documented show at Ram's Head Live in Baltimore. It was Testament, like Anthrax, and like somebody else, and somebody hit the board with a beer that they chucked, and it blew the board. And they were able to get the show done by running everything through an iPad.
Right.
That's insane to me.
It's
one thing to run everything through an iPad for locals night or regionals night. But I mean, this is Testament and Anthrax, heaviest of heavy, full bands, all that kind of stuff. And they were able to run it through an iPad. But the funny thing is, I went to the next. They did a follow-up tour like about a year or so later. Came through Baltimore again with Testament and Anthrax again, and there were covers over the board when they were playing.
Big plastic covers or whatever, like glass.
Exactly.
Learn that lesson really fast. You can run an entire club on an iPad. There's software to run the lights. There's software to run the televisions that are around the club. There's software to run the beer taps. There's software to run the sound system. You can run an entire venue from an iPad. I remember one of my bosses did it.
Man, that's incredible.
They pulled the arena on Staten Island. The guy ran the whole club from a pad.
Oh, man. That's true, because a lot of those places will have like some semblance of those, like electronic DJ screens or whatever, where they can just choose what list they need songs to come from.
Yeah, there's a company called Orange Door that does that. They make like they make a system. It's an electronic jukebox, basically digital jukebox. 70,000 songs, whatever. Pick your genre, you know. It's a 70s. It's a 70s night. It's a dance night. It's a Latin night. Pick your genre. Bang, the thing makes the playlist.
That's crazy, man. It's a different world now. Right back to you, Angel.
No, I'm just blown away by 70,000 songs, but hey, we're up there in age. So the last 40 years, there's been a lot of music that has come out.
Yeah.
So Brian wants to know, if you never became a DJ, what would you be doing today?
That is a good question. I was born to do this. I didn't really have a choice. It chose me. I didn't choose this. It chose me. But I also do graphic design. So I've been a graphic designer for about 30 years. Did my own website, or did my own logo, all that kind of stuff. I do my own show posters. So I probably would have been a graphic designer full time. That's, I always was a pen to paper artist when I was a kid. And then when the computer came along, another tool to create art, I started on a Mac. My first Mac was, 1991, something like that. 1990. Playing around on it. I got the software manual, and over the course of a couple of years of trial and error, I became proficient enough to get jobs doing that. So I would have been a graphic artist.
And Adam wants to know how many people did the club accommodate?
Well, the legal capacity was 1750. That's what the sign said on the wall. But we used to
legal capacity.
We could fit 3,000 people in the club without, before it got dangerous. We had 3,000 people in there.
That's not bad.
So, yeah, I remember Accept being crowded. Accept was opening for Kiss in the city. And what we used to do sometimes, we'd get a band that was opening, and we'd go scoop them up to do a late show at Lemoore. We did that with Rat. Rat was opening for Motley Crue. We sent the cars out. We got them in the cars, drove them to Brooklyn, and they would start at like 2:30 in the morning. but the club was open before, so back then it was like, who cares, right? The Accept crowd was so tight that I saw a girl pass out, and she never hit the ground. She stood up. She passed out, standing up, and that's the way she stayed until her boyfriend was able to revive her. But that's how tightly packed, shoulder to shoulder, that night was. 3,000 people. It's pretty tight.
And I have another question, and I'm just curious to ask. Back in those days, did any unknown bands ever come up to you and give you their tape and say, "Hey, can you play this at the club?" or anything? Did that ever happen to you?
Happened to me a lot, but I can tell you the ones that were the exceptions to the rule. 1983, I was working during a crowded weekend. I don't remember who the bands were. A young stranger came up into the booth by the name of Bobby Gustafson, and he was holding a cassette in his hand. No case, just a black cassette, no markings, no printings. He said, "Hey man, can you play this? This is my band." And I said, "Well, let me listen to it first." So he probably thought, "What is this guy? What is he, a prick? Let me listen to it first." Like what do you mean? Let me listen to it first. So the reason why I said that is because we had a crappy tape deck in the rack. It was like some crappy piece of Radio Shack thing, and so you had to listen to tapes first, because they sounded like crap over the sound system. So I put the tape in, put up my headphones, and with the opening notes of Overkill, the tape blew me away, man. I fell in love with it. I loved it. Fantastic. Best cassette tape I had heard to that date. So I said, I'm going to play this. I played the whole side one. There was a band that came on, and after the band went off, Bobby came back up into the booth, and I played side two. And I made the announcement, "You heard it first here anywhere. This is Overkill." And it was probably the first time Overkill was played in front of a significant crowd of 1,500 to 2,000 people. And so and then after that, Overkill got a gig at the club, and they wound up playing 45 shows with us. And the owners were their managers for a couple of years on their way up. So we had a great relationship with them. Still do. I still do shows with Overkill to this day. So that was one of the ones where somebody came up and it was a great tape. Some guys, some bands would come up and go, "Hey, play my band." I listen to it and I go, "Oh man, this sucks." So then I would tell them, "Look, I can't play it because the tape player sounds like shit." It was a good excuse,
right,
to tell bands that I didn't want to play, that the tape player was crappy.
Nice.
So Bobby Hamble from Biohazard gave me a demo tape, but he gave it to me at my house. It wasn't a DJ booth thing, but I went to the club and I played it. And that was another one. Another one was my friend Billy was working at Columbia, I think. He was able to get an advanced copy of Screaming for Vengeance on cassette. All it said on it was Screaming. That's it. He brought it to the club and he gave it to me. He goes, "You got to play this. This is Brand New Priest." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" I put it on. I was like, "Hey, everybody, Brand New Priest." Like, I hit the play. You could hear a pin drop. Everybody was waiting for this to start. And, of course, the song, The Healy and Electric Eye, came out of that. And there was a whole club. Their jaws just dropped. It was an unbelievable experience. So a couple of cassettes that were important.
No. So did you ever have, because DJs are very important. If it wasn't for the DJ, Bon Jovi would not have a hit with Runaway. Pour Some Sugar on Me would not have been a hit because it was played at strip clubs in Florida.
Right.
So did you ever have A&R people come up to you for recommendations of, hey, which bands is selling or etc.? Did you ever have that with A&R people?
I had good relationships with Metal Blade. Especially when Brian opened his New York office, because he was in the club all the time. Whenever he came to New York, he came to Lemoore before they opened the office in New York. So he would send his people, to the club with a stack of records for me, promotional copies. And I would pick through them, play what I liked and not play what I didn't like. But there was very few things that I didn't like. So I wound up playing a lot of that stuff. I had a great relationship with Mr. John Zazula from Megaforce. And he would give me promotional copies of, I got the early Metallica promos, Anthrax, all the early bands that he signed, King's X promos. So I got a lot of promotional copies that I was able to play them way before they were released, which was to the delight of the Lemoore crowd. It was a beautiful thing. So I got to break a lot of stuff, especially Metal Blade and Megaforce. They were two of the biggest labels, even though they were small, but in terms of metal, they were big. And I had a good friend named Scott Koenig, who was the Fear Factory's manager. Back then, they called him Metal Scott. He was like a man everybody knew who he was. He was famous in the scene. And Scott Koenig worked for Vinyl Mania, which was a record store. And he'd come to the club and give me stacks of records to play. Just stuff that he thought was cool. Like, "Hey, play this." Alice in Chains, I remember him giving me. For the first time. So, and then I would get, the record companies the bigger companies would mail us stuff. We'd get stuff in the mail. I'd get records in the mail all the time, from Capitol, Atlantic, whoever was there. They'd send a poster, and then, a little promotional kit. So I didn't have direct relationships with them, but I got a lot of this stuff through the mail. So. But especially Metal Blade and Megaforce and Combat too. Combat was another one that brought records to the club because they knew how important it was to get records played at Lemoore. If I played a track at Lemoore, people went out and bought the record. So that was it was an important thing back then. We don't have that kind of power now, but back then, you could wield a lot of power doing that stuff back in the early '80s.
Oh, for sure, definitely. With having the relationship that you had with Brian and Metal Blade, did he ever send you like early Lizzie Borden stuff? I'm a big Lizzie Borden nerd.
Oh yeah, I have the white promos. I kept everything that he sent me. I still got it all.
Nice.
He bought and played the club a bunch of times, man. They were a great band, man. Great West
Yeah.
Coast guys. A lot of fun. You guys are from like the Baltimore area, right? So
Angel lives in Jersey, yeah, and I live in Maryland, yeah, and I'm from Massachusetts, but I've been down here in Maryland for a while.
so Rat Child, right, was one of our favorites. We always loved when Rat Child pulled up to the club, and I'll tell you why. Because they used to bring Everclear with them, and you can't get Everclear in New York; it's illegal. But in Maryland, it's not. Right. They called it double vision. So Rat Child would come in, they'd get backstage, they put this big giant punch bowl out and pour bottles of Everclear and Hawaiian Punch in there, and then bust out a case of like Dixie cups, and that was it. We were walking from backstage all day, drinking Everclear and Hawaiian Punch. Those guys were so much fun, man. They were great. They were great to hang out with and party with, and they always put on a great show. And of course, Shannon went on to be a drummer for Godsmack.
Yeah,
He has good memories of the club.
Oh, that's awesome. And did Godsmack come through as well?
I wish. No, they were by the time they got big, the club was already pretty much on the decline. Like we had it was once the grunge thing came in, and the metal stuff was kind of went back underground, and the grunge was big. Death metal started to bubble up right around 1990, but that didn't get big until say 5-10 years later.
Yeah.
Even though I was a fan of it, we weren't doing a lot of death metal until the 2000s. We had Dimmu Borgir, Arch Enemy, Morbid Angel, all the greats, Incantation. Everybody came through in the arts. So it was a lot of fun to see those guys.
That's awesome, man. That's super duper sick, man. So I got to kick out this question / request of stories, because this is purely for me, but I know the fans would all like super duper dig. But you got to hit me with some typo negative stories, dude. Love typo negative.
I got a typo negative story for you. Me, Pete Steele, and two other guys, we were on Staten Island at a place called Heaven, and we were drinking. And we were going to go back to Brooklyn to Lemoore to finish off the night. So we all got into my friend's car, and we were driving down the Staten Island Expressway, and a bunch of Guidos in a Cadillac, Cougine guys, like, the Saturday Night Fever guys, they thought we were chicks. They thought there was 4 chicks in the car because we all have long hair, right? They start following us. So they're following the car. We're like, these guys are following us. So we get to the Verrazano Bridge, and there's this whole sort of island thing where you can pull over, by the where the tolls used to be. So my friend pulls the car over by the tolls, and they pull over right behind us, and they're figuring oh man, we're gonna score, right? Pete Steele gets out of the car, right? He's 9 fucking feet tall. He gets out of the car and he keeps getting out and out and out. And these guys just off like bats out of hell. And we just laughed all the way to Lemoore, man.
Oh my God.
It was really funny. I mean, you might expect the guy to get out of the car, but you're not expecting Pete Steele. That was the last thing on their list.
Right. No, it totally, dude, because it reminds me a little bit of this scene from that when they made the Rock of Ages musical into a movie. There's this scene where Alec Baldwin's character is yelling at his bartender because he's looking at these 2 girls at the bar, and he's like, dude, what if I told you 1,000,000 times girls drink for free, guys pay full fee? And these chicks turn around and they're guys, and the bartender's just like, they are dudes. I haven't charged a girl since 1974, and Baldwin's character is just looking at these dudes with his jaw on the ground. But I love the way you were saying it, because it's one thing to make that mistake, but then when a dude just keeps getting taller as he gets out of the car, that's not what you're looking for.
Yeah, he was ready to take them apart, and he could have.
For sure, man. What do you remember about their sets at Lemoore?
About who?
about what do you remember about Typo's sets?
Oh, I remember Pete. He was just walking off the middle of the stage, going, "I got to take a shit. I'll be right back." And like,
Oh my god!
went to the bathroom, came back. Uh, he was very witty. I loved his sense of humor. You know, he'd get on the mic and go, "I want to thank all you people for helping me pay my phone bill." You know, he was just like so, like one of us. You know, and I remember one particular show, probably one of the last shows, one of the last times I saw him. He had these two really sexy vampire type chicks dancing around on either corner of the stage, and they had beer kegs lined up in front of them, and they were giving out beer to everybody that was in the front of the crowd. Just free beer, just, kegging everybody out. Like that was Pete's like sense of humor. And then the last time I saw them, they did a carnival reunion at the Staten Island Lemoore, and his sound guy played Tiptoe Through the Tulips for 40 minutes.
What?
On repeat. Before they went on, and then after they went off. It was like he burned through my whole DJ set by doing that. But that was his way, like, ha, you know. that was the joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those things that after the 10th time, you wanted to pull your hair out. Never mind hearing it for 40 minutes.
Seriously, after like I remember when they plugged that song into an episode of SpongeBob that I stumbled across one time, and I was just like, oh my god, this is insane. Like I don't think I could handle that for 4 minutes, let alone 40.
Yeah, it just kept going and going and going. Like I said, it blew my whole set. I was supposed to spin for an hour and a half after they left. I just stood there by the bar, you know. What can you do?
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pete's passing?
No, I don't remember. I just know that was the last time I saw him, was the Carnival reunion on Staten Island. I don't remember where I was, but it was a black day, man, a dark day in musical history. I think that if Pete's life hadn't been tragically cut short, Typo Negative would be a lot more famous than they are.
I agree.
Would have a ton more recognition than they have now. Not that they don't have any recognition, but they were in the process of planting their flag all over the globe.
Yeah.
And they practically invented the goth genre.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a few more albums, a couple of more albums, everybody would have went, oh, this guy is a fucking genius. But we already knew that.
You're on screen when he makes a cameo.
Oh, that's rad. Like, because Carnivore, the band Carnivore had Lemoore history as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they won our first Battle of the Bands back in the day. We started this Battle of the Bands thing that lasted about 6 months. Every Thursday night, 3 or 4 bands for 6 months. When the smoke cleared, there were 2 bands left, Carnivore and Disciple. Disciple was another good band, but they really didn't do anything with their career. Carnivore won the Battle of the Bands, and they became, a local draw.
Yeah.
From that day on.
No, for sure. Because like what you were talking about with Typo Negative planting their flag and stuff, like one of my favorite, and I still watch it regularly. But their set at Vakken is phenomenal. I mean, Pete's wearing like his priest outfit with like the little green, collar and stuff, and it's incredible when it comes to that. Have you seen any of the like post like Typo bands that like Kenny and Johnny Kelly have done, like Seventh Void or Silvertomb?
Yeah, I like them all. And then Sal Abrascato with the Pale Horse Named Death. He's been doing some real good stuff. Those albums are heavily influenced by the Typo flavor. Mm-hmm. And Johnny Kelly is just one of the hardest working drummers around. Playing with everybody. Their work is cool because you can't hear Typo Negative anymore. So listening to Silvertomb and Pale Horse Named Death is the next best thing, I would say.
No, 100%. Like that's actually something that I'm personally really looking forward to about M3 next week, is because Quiet Riot's going to play there, and Johnny's taking over the throne from Frankie.
Right.
to hold it down. So I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully getting to see Johnny again and say what's up and stuff like that. Because I definitely love that. In fact, I got this like thrill because I love Typo. I've got the O negative tattooed on my wrist. Like I remember when Silver Tomb came out, and I saw their like very first Baltimore show. It was actually the Sunday of a Monster Mania weekend, which is a horror movie convention that I'm a huge fan of. And so I went to the Sunday Monster Mania and then went to Baltimore Soundstage for Silver Tomb, and they were absolutely fantastic. But when they got their kind of merch set up and their merch store and stuff like that, they were selling their vinyl, like fully signed and stuff like that. And I got this like huge thrill out of it when I got it in the mail, because sure enough, everything it's beautiful. It sounds fantastic. It's got all 5 signatures on it, but Johnny Kelly still signs with the O negative logo as part of the signature. And I'm like, it's got the O negative logo like on the cover, like yes. So I was like nerding out over my own purchase.
Yeah, they were a great band. Like I said, like they're underrated as far as the groundbreaking stuff that they did.
Absolutely. And with a band like the Misfits now, which with the original thing that they're doing, they're playing just arenas all over the place. Even if it's not necessarily like the huge arenas that the Misfits are doing, because again, this is the fans finally getting Jerry and Glenn back on stage together. Right. But I definitely am with you where like Typo would easily, I agree, be playing just big venues regularly. They wouldn't be playing like the sound stages or whatever of like Baltimore or other stuff. I definitely think you're right. I think it would just be a constant climb to where they're playing, the bigger theaters like the Rams Heads and the Fillmores and the stuff like that, all the way up to like amphitheater type stuff like Merriweather Post Pavilion, which is where M3 will be at. If you've never been to Merriweather, it's one of those nice big open amphitheaters with seats that go back and then a giant standing room like grass lawn.
Awesome space.
Yeah. So that's super duper cool for sure. Oh, absolutely.
I used to shoot pool with Pete Steele, a place called the Roadhouse. It was a local Brooklyn bar that we used to go in, and I DJ'd there every now and then, and there was pool tables on the second floor. We'd go up there and shoot pool with everybody, man. He'd sign autographs. He's just a sweet guy, really.
Totally, man. There was a pool cue that exists that's long enough for Pete to use.
Well, they all look short next to him, but yeah.
Absolutely, brother. Angel, let's kick it back to you, my guy.
Question from Brian. He wants to know, what would you call the pinnacle of your audio collection?
That's what I say. Most collectors would say, I don't know, a test pressing, a rare test pressing or something. But my favorite record it's a voiceograph. I don't know if you guys know what a voiceograph is, but back in the old days in Coney Island, there was a booth on the boardwalk where you could go in and record your own song. It was called a voiceograph, and you would sing into the microphone. It would record the wax and spit out a record. And it was, I don't know, $2 back then, maybe $1 to do that. So it was like a gimmicky thing on Coney Island. But my favorite record is my father singing a song to my mom. I think the song is called "Everything I Have Is Yours." And it was an old tune from like the 30s or 40s. So that is the most prized record in my collection.
That's awesome.
Jules wants to know, did you do flyers for the shows back in the day?
I didn't. We had our own printer guy that used to do those things. It was very back in the 80s. It was all very paced up and stuff like that. And the flyers were made by.
I recognized it because I was like, "That's the Weather Channel."
Somebody's in there. One of the owners of the club, his name was Frank, and he had the best penmanship out of everybody. So he used to make the calendars that we printed out and gave out to everybody. But the flyers were done by a guy named Mark Schwartz, and he had a printing company, and would print up our show flyers. And then for the specialty ones, they brought in an outside printing company for that, but I wasn't personally involved in it. I have a bunch of them though. I've collected a whole bunch of them over the years. At the end of the show, I just pull it right off the wall, take it home with me. So I've got a bunch of them, but I didn't make any of them.
Have you ever DJ'd any celebrity weddings?
No. Well, a couple of record industry people, booking agents and stuff like that, like people on the inside of the music industry. I've done some weddings with them, and there were some celebrities present. But I've not done a celebrity wedding. I've opened for all the big four at one point. Opened for Metallica, opened for Slayer, opened for Testament, opened for Overkill. I've opened for thousands of bands live, and supported them on live shows. But celebrity wedding, that's on my list. Well, I think I'd like to do one of those at some point.
Nice.
Yeah. Jay?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. For sure. Hey, I'm definitely down. I don't necessarily know if I can call myself a celebrity, but I'll let Alex DJ my wedding.
Sure.
Because the only other thing too that I'm working on that is for whenever Megan and I get married is to get Wednesday 13 to come to our wedding.
Sure, I'm down for that. Why not?
Yeah, man.
One of the weddings I did, I had Sanhedrin play. Sanhedrin is a great band, man.
Oh yeah.
They played the wedding that I spun at. It was record industry people, great people, man.
Oh yeah.
So
for sure.
L'Amour comes with a lot of funny stories, man. There was one story I wanted to tell about the band Lamb of God.
Absolutely.
They were playing at L'Amour. It was, when you play at L'Amour, it's a big deal at this point, because it was a launching pad for a lot of bands that went on to become stars. So Lamb of God was going to play a headline show, and one of the record companies had expressed interest. I think it was Combat or somebody. So they were going to be there. And the buzz started to get around that Lamb of God was playing, and a couple of record companies were coming to see them. Well, it wound up that almost every record company in the area wanted to get in on this. You know what I mean? They wanted to be, if they were going to be the ones to sign them, they wanted to be the ones.
Yeah. Alex, real quick, were they still going by Lamb? Were they Lamb of God by that point, or were they still Burn the Priest?
No, they were Lamb of God at this point.
Okay.
So Century Media was there, Atlantic, Capital, you name it, from A to Z. Almost every record company in the area was there to see Lamb of God, and they were so like, this is the biggest show of our lives. We got to pull this off. We got to be great tonight. So they go out on stage. Randy Blythe takes a couple of steps. He slips right off the front of the stage, hits his head, knocks himself out unconscious. On the way to the hospital, show's over.
Oh my God.
They did 1.5 songs. That was it. End of the show. They had to get off the stage. The video's on YouTube. It's out there somewhere. You can see that they were stunned for a minute. I mean, I didn't even know what to do. Should we continue instrumental? Should we get somebody else to come up and sing, one of the fans? What should we do? There was a lot of confusion. Anyway, they went off stage eventually. And they're all backstage, of course, depressed. This is the biggest. They blew the biggest night of their lives. At least that's what they were thinking. The next day, they get a call from Century Media. Century Media signs Lamb of God the following day. So they went from being the worst show of their lives to the best show of their lives in one night.
1.5 songs, damn.
1.5 songs.
It all happened at L'Amour.
And a concussion.
Randy, thank goodness, turned out to be okay, but he couldn't continue that night. Obviously, he was in the hospital.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, my girlfriend was just like, she knows Lamb of God, so she was like, Randy Blythe? I was like, yeah. took a header off the stage a song and a half in after on what was looking to be their Sign Me showcase.
You can imagine their emotion going from deep in the depths to floating on a cloud, right? From one day to the next. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, dude. Are there any other bands that you can think of on like some type of a big set or whatever that completely like shit the bed?
I can't say I've ever seen a bad show. I mean, I've seen a lot of lousy local bands, mess up. I've seen bands break up in the middle of a set because they were so bad at the club. Because what happens is you get a band in there that's like they have 30 or 40 friends, and all their friends are telling them they're great. And then they go into Lemoore, and there's 500 people in the crowd that don't know who they are and don't like them. This is when reality sets in. You're not as great as your friends are telling you are. And, when you go before a crowd like that, that's a pretty discerning crowd that knows a lot about metal. I've seen bands break up backstage after a 20 or 30-minute set, because of that kind of thing. But I can't say that I've ever seen a bad show there. I really can't say that. All the bands that played there were entertaining in some way.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you about this because I just always found it really interesting. Were you there when Iron Maiden was performing as Charlotte and the Harlots?
I was there.
What was the deal with them being on as Charlotte and the Harlots?
Okay, I wasn't working that night. That was Chuck's night, but I was there anyway. What had happened was this all started. The seed that planted this show was planted in 1983 or 1982. 1983, I want to say it was. Iron Maiden was in town playing the Beacon Theater or something, and they were here for like a week. And they always used to come to Lemoore to drink. They loved Lemoore. And they knew the owners. The owners made friends with them. And they let them go in the back. They'd send 3 bottles of champagne back there, as much beer as they could possibly consume. And they'd just get back there and drink and have a good time. So there's one Thursday night in the summer. There was maybe 75 people in the club, 100 people in the club, and it's an empty club. 100 people in a 3,000 cap room. It's a relatively empty club, right? Maiden comes in. They get set up in the back. They start drinking 3 bottles of champagne, free beer, and they're having a good time, jolly old time. And there's a band called TT Quick playing on the stage, local Jersey band. I'm sure you guys know who they are.
Yeah, that's oh shit! He's now with Fronts Except
Mark Tornillo.
Yeah, Mark Tornillo.
Right, so he plays a role in this too. So TT Quick with Mark Tornillo is, thank you, Steve, is they're playing. They played every Thursday night at Lemoore for like 6 months. They were like a resident Thursday night thing. We used to do that and rotate bands every few months. So TT Quick's on the stage. Iron Maiden's they're all pumped up. They're all licking up. All of a sudden, the lights go black. And when the lights come up, it's Iron Maiden. And everybody's there except Bruce Dickinson. So Mark starts to walk off the stage, and Steve Harris grabs him and goes, "Where you going, buddy? You're going to sing." And so they do Red Child, Murders in the Room Organ, and another Maiden song. And it's like Christmas in July. The crowd is bugging out. These 150 people that were there, 7,500 people that were there, got to see Iron Maiden play 3 songs at Lemoore on a lark, like just because they were drunk and they felt like it. All right. And then they gave TT Quick back their instruments. They went back to the bar, resumed their drinking. TT Quick finished their set. And those people got to tell everybody who weren't there that night that story. So the seeds were planted that night. The owners were like, "Why don't you guys come back and do a show, like a real show with us?" And Steve Harris was like, "Yeah, well, we will. That's, at some point we'll talk about it." It took 5 years to happen because the Charlotte and the Harlots show was 1988. 5 years later, Iron Maiden was coming across overseas on a press junket. And the club offered to pay for the entire press junket, the transportation, all of the guys, for a one-off show. And that's how it happened. We paid for the press junket. Their first show on the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son tour was at Lemoore. The rest of the shows were at arenas. It was Mother's Day, May 8th, 1988. Maiden and Charlotte and the Harlots. And the YouTube, it's all over YouTube. The entire show was on there. The energy in that room was none like I ever saw before. It was the perfect storm. Greatest metal club in the world, greatest metal band in the world. It was just an unbelievable night. Unforgettable.
What's the purpose of doing a name change for that instead of booking promoting it as like a an intimacy show.
They did it as a secret show called Charlotte and the Horse because the club could only hold a certain amount of people. They didn't want to have this million people rush to buy tickets. You know what I mean? There would have been a lot more people, like 10,000 people to buy tickets.
Right.
At that point, they were a stadium level band. So, and the funny part about that is a lot of people thought Charlotte and the Harlots was a cover band and decided not to go to the show or buy a ticket. And those people are still kicking themselves in the ass today.
Steve's watching right now while he's finishing up at work. He says he was there.
Oh yeah, it was a crazy night, man. Forget about it. They opened up with Moonchild and they never looked back. Never looked back. It was an amazing exchange of energy between band and crowd. It's something that bands and crowds only dream of. You know what I mean?
Nice. Hell yeah. Now, before I kick it back up to Angel, because I'm using this as kind of a bridge to Angel, because this is a me and Angel story. So we were in Nashville last month, and we got when we applied for our various interviews for Rockin' Pod, there was one particular heavy hitter that I really wanted us to get, in my opinion, and we got him, and that was Eddie Ojeda from Twisted Sister.
Eddie figures.
Yeah, you got it. So I wanted to ask you, the story of Twisted Sister as a club band is legendary. Once the music videos came out, of course they became the Twisted Sister that the average metal fan knows as Twisted Sister. But when you do your research or have learned from some bitchin' documentaries like We Are Twisted Fucking Sister and stuff like that, which I think is a fantastic documentary.
Great film.
Their rise to dominance was as a legendary club act in New York, especially while they were fighting for their record deal. So lay some Twisted Sister on us before I kick it back to Angel.
Yeah, Twisted Sister they started out on Long Island, a club called Speaks. That was their regular haunt. They'd play 3 or 4 sets a night, 4 nights a week. And it was one of those situations where you could really hone your craft. If you're doing 3 or 4 sets a night, 4 or 5 nights a week, you get good at your instrument pretty quick. Yeah. And so that was one of the things, one of the assets of working during those days where you did multiple sets on multiple nights, was that you really could hone your craft. And Twisted Sister did just that. They became the dominant force in cover bands at that point. And they were making a living. Back then there were enough clubs in the New York and New Jersey circuit to make a living playing this whole circuit. You could actually make a living at it, get paid. So when Twisted Sister came to Lemoore, they always sold out the club. And the first night they ever played there, they sold out the club. And they sold out the Palladium as an unsigned band, which is, I don't think anybody's ever done it before or since. So they had that kind of firepower at that point. When they came to Lemoore, they always sold out the club. And they liked Lemoore so much that they started playing there on a regular. The first show was back in 1979. Twisted Sister was the first rock band ever to play Lemoore. Wow. And they were also the first band that Lemoore allowed to play their all original set. When Twisted Sister became an original band, we were the first club to allow them to do their show as an original band. So what they would do is they would slip an original in to their set. First there was 1, then there were 2, then there were 3, to get people get their feet wet to listening to original Sister stuff. But they were so dominating. And I remember the one night they came in and I had just been hired. Mike Pace went over to the Brooklyn Zoo and I had taken over and I was playing metal. Mike was playing like Zeppelin and stuff. I was playing metal in between the bands. And Dee Snider said, how about that fucking DJ, man? That man knows how to kick ass. You ain't going to hear no Boy George in here. That's when I heard that. I was like, that was a real, really high compliment from them. They noticed the difference, in the programming when they came in the club. And that was right around when Stay Hungry had come out. And so the last show that they did before they went out into the world was at Lemoore. 1984 Stay Hungry was a Stay Hungry show. And they transitioned from a cover band to an original band. And then they went out into the world after playing Lemoore, and they went straight up into superstardom after that.
Wow. That's crazy, dude. Were you at the New York Steel reunion show for 9/11?
It was not. My girlfriend was there at the time.
Oh, really? Gotcha.
Not me.
Yeah, that's cool. I was just curious because that was I remember when that was put on by Eddie, and they had like Ace Frehley and Skid Row and stuff playing, and he was looking for that big heavy hitter band and was able to get Twisted Sister to reunite. So being a New York guy, I was curious if you were there.
Unfortunately I was not, but Twisted Sister must have done 30 or 40 shows at the club as headliners, and in the film, the owner of the club, George Parenti, is in the Twisted Sister film that you see, and he says that they called them the rent paying band because every time Twisted Sister played, the rent was paid. So they were always happy about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, hey boys, thanks for keeping the lights on.
Exactly.
Hell yeah, Angel, let's bring you back in, my guy.
Oh, this is a nice question, and I'm curious for Jay to actually answer it as well.
Okay.
What is the most you've paid for a?
Man, that's a good question. I don't think I've paid more than $300 or $400 for an album. That was something I really wanted. Most of the stuff that I have that's worth a lot of money, I got for nothing back in the day. I mean, I got test pressings from John Zazula and test pressings from Brian Slagle that are, they're pretty expensive these days. But I didn't buy them. So, but if I actually had to go out and buy them today, I couldn't afford it. But I think $300 or $400 it was something that I really wanted. I don't remember what, but if it's something I really want, there's no stopping me.
Yeah.
I'll pay whatever it is.
For sure.
Ransom.
Like I just well, the most it was what they were selling. So recently, and Metal Summoner fans, you guys probably saw when I went live. So I went out last week with my girlfriend to see to Record Store Day to support my buddy Dave at Vintage Vinyl, and half of Trickster was there. Steve Brown and Jay Farley, both alumni of our show, and I wanted to go out and to support. Well, at their merch booth, they were selling a vinyl of New Audio Machine, which is a great album. It was like their second. It was like not their most current album, but the album right before that. But no, I got that because I really wanted it because I was like, no, man, I need a Trickster vinyl. I have all their albums, and all of their albums are signed and stuff like that. And I was like, I need a Trickster vinyl, and so I picked up that. But probably the coolest vinyl that I have that also is mixed with like price, I guess. Yeah. And ironically, I'm actually wearing the shirt for the band. So it's this horror punk band I really like called Silent Horror. They're out of Tennessee. So anyway, a former alumni of the show, Argyle Goolsby, who I love to death. I love his solo material front to back. And he has a horror punk band called Blitzkid, who I love. I saw them multiple times on their most recent tour. Anyway, Goolsby played in Silent Horror for a little while. And they put out like a compilation album with Goolsby on vocals and so on and so forth. Ended up having a falling out. It got kind of ugly. Goolsby's been on the show and requested not to really talk about like the Silent Horror stuff, which is totally fine. No worries, all good. Anyway, years ago, I went and saw Goolsby on a solo tour that he was doing with Michael Graves from the Misfits. And I had my Blitzkid stuff with me because I wanted him to sign it and stuff. And I also had Silent Horror. Totally polite, absolute professional. But when he got to the Silent Horror album, he was like, you know what? I'm just going to respectfully pass on this one. I was like, okay, no worries. It totally happens. Anyway, a little while after that, I'm just tooling around on eBay and I find a Silent Horror vinyl with the same lineup, including Ghouls, with a different album art and really cool album art. And it was like number 37 of something or other. It's over there somewhere on my wall. It's like number 30. So it's a numbered series. Right. And it's signed by everyone, including Goolsby. It was like
to do any work.
Yep. It was like $130. And I was like,
worth it.
Fuck it. I'm getting this because I have personal history with the fact that Goolsby's not going to sign stuff. Again, he won't be a jerk. He's an absolute doll and a complete professional when handling that matter. But he won't sign that stuff. So I was like, okay, this guy is selling this thing.
I'll get it somehow.
At a reasonable price for the story that I know. And periodically I stumble across exactly. And now it's funny because periodically I've seen silent horror vinyls that aren't signed on eBay for like $350, and I'm just like, that's a win.
Prices now are just insane. I mean, it's
really
in the past 5 years, the prices have been jacked up exponentially. Like 5 years ago, a Judas Priest album, Defenders of the Faith album, was $15, $12 in mint condition. Now it's like $65. It's like it's just. I don't know what the hell happened. I don't know what happened.
I don't know, man. And it's funny. It's not that this like resurgence of vinyl isn't awesome, but the fact that like a Rat album that you can find in like a used record store for $10 is like repressed at like FYE for like 36 now. Yeah. And I'm like, wait. How does that even work? I can still get this album.
Yeah, Record Store Day is weird like that too. Like Record Store Day is like they got you by your balls in the respect that they're gonna put out a live Motorhead album that has never been released. Now, if you're a Motorhead fan, you want to have that piece in with the rest, right? It's limited. It's 1,000 copies. It's whatever, white vinyl or white splatter or whatever you call it, and it's I don't know, it's $40 or $50. Right. Yeah. So you stand online with all the other people waiting, hoping to get the Cure album before it goes on eBay for $400, and you don't get it. So what do you do now? Now you got to go to eBay and pay a collector's price. Yeah. It's just it defeats the whole purpose of what Record Store Day is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Record Store Day was a lot of fun when it was a grassroots movement put on by the mom and pop stores, not run by the record labels. Now the conglomerates are steering the ship. It's a whole different story. But I did manage to get the Kitty album for $18, so that was a score.
I do want to get that myself, and I might not be able to now, but I'm going to go back and visit Dave tomorrow because, like, I went on Record Store Day last Saturday, to support Steve and PJ. And the other thing that was actually cool was the headlining band because he had bands live in the record store. The band that played after Trickster was Bastardane. Do you know who they are, Alex?
I've heard of them, yes.
That's James Hetfield's kid.
Yeah, that's them.
Yep. It's James Hetfield's son's band. He's a drummer. And they're very, very Danzig. Like, I was watching them play going like, this is so Danzig. This is so sludgy. Which I was personally all about because I love Danzig.
Kelly played with him too.
Say that again?
Johnny Kelly played with Danzig too.
Oh, totally. Still plays with them now, as far as I know. But with Tommy Victor from Prom.
Right. Good stuff.
And, so that's super duper cool. But yeah, I'm gonna hit up the store tomorrow and just see, maybe pick a little bit of the scraps because I'm not expecting there to be any because I didn't see any when I was at the show. But there was a Kissology Eric Carr vinyl for Record Store.
Not sure if I like her. I have an autographed Lick It Up album from him. I met him. He used to hang out in Lemoore East back in
cool.
He only lived a few blocks away from the club. And he was in Lemoore East all the time. And I met him in a really strange way. I was in the men's room, and I was at the urinal, and this guy walks in the urinal next to me, and he's a head and a half taller than me, but he looks just like Eric Carr. Now I'm trying to reconcile this because he's the shortest guy on the album cover, right? But here's this guy looking like Eric Carr that's a head and a half taller than me. I said, dude, you look just like Eric Carr. He goes, I am Eric Carr. up and sign my record, man. He came up to the DJ booth and he signed "Lick It Up" for me, which I have on my wall, my autograph wall. So,
oh, that's sick. Do you have stuff signed by Typo Negative and Peter Steele?
I have a napkin signed by him that he gave me, like, well, while we were shooting pool. You know, it was like, sign something for me, whatever. Like, you know, just so because people always say, hey, you know Pete. Like, so I wanted to prove it to the world. So he signed a napkin for me. I have that somewhere.
That's hilarious.
He said, "To Alex, love and lost Pete Steele."
Oh, absolutely. No, 100% for sure.
The best autograph I ever got was from Lemmy. Lemmy was Motorhead was doing a weekend at Lemoore. And Friday, Saturday night, and the weekend after was Twisted Sister 2 nights in a row. So it was a great month.
Wow.
Lemmy had just finished sound checking in. He was playing Pac-Man. We had a Pac-Man video game in the corner of the bar. He was playing Pac-Man. And I brought down my No Sleep to Hammersmith record from the booth. I said, Lemmy, can you sign this for me? And he says, yeah. So he's writing. I'm like, he's taking, I don't know. It seemed like forever he was like, instead of just signing his name, he was writing this whole thing. And he gives it back to me. He doesn't say a word. He gives it back to me. And I was like, thanks, man. I walk away. I read it. It says, to Dick Brooklyn from Cunt London.
Wow.
I just busted out laughing, man. I don't know. You might have to blank that out.
No.
I was just, it was hysterical. Like, you know, best signature I ever got.
That's awesome.
You know, best saying, you know, next to a signature.
Oh, hell yeah. I never got to meet Lemmy, but I was in an album store years ago, just leafing through rock and metal like we tend to do. And I stumbled across, and I'm going through Motorhead CDs, and it was right there. Used CD for $6, the Kiss of Death album signed by Lemmy.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah. And I already had Kiss of Death, but I was like, oh yeah, that's a purchase. We're gonna get that. I
wouldn't let anybody else have it either.
Yeah. I was literally like, I'm not leaving this behind. Hell no, dude. This is
even
that. When the last time I got to meet Doro Pesh, I was interviewing her on her bus, and I brought some stuff for her to sign, and she signed my Warlock Hellbound album. And it was great because Doro's a doll. Like, she's so sweet and such great to her fans. And it was great too because she wrote like this kind of like little like love letter, as I like to call it, just on the vinyl. Like, you know, like to Jay, like keep her rock, and wrote for like a minute, you know, all the best, love Doro. Like, she's super duper cool. And I always thought that was cool. And I've actually got the Pride and White Lion's first album on my wall at home, in my bedroom, signed by Mike.
Yeah.
So I've got because I love White Lion, and I'm a big Mike Tramp guy, so I'm super stoked about that for sure.
They gave me a poster signed by them a long time ago. I got it, like I still got it. I kept it from the 1980s. I'm about to hang that one up as soon as I can get a good frame for it. But it's finally coming through the cobwebs after all these years.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Angel, let's kick it.
Pen, you know, ballpoint pen.
Oh, definitely. Get it all like good and set up correctly for sure. Angel, let's kick it back up to you. Metal Summoners, you guys have been fantastic. Keep the comments coming in, but it is last call for alcohol, friends. This is a final call for comments, questions, anything you want to ask Alex. We've definitely got him for a little while longer, but we totally don't want to chew up all of his evening. So it is last call for alcohol, friends.
My evening's shot anyway. Don't worry about it. I set it aside for this.
Nice. Take that, other plans.
We always got the longest running shows, don't we? Last week we did 2.5 hours. Tonight, who knows?
You can't help it. You know, I could talk metal for a month. You know.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you know, it really had to.
Yeah.
Any cool moments while out to dinner with a band? I don't think I've ever eaten with anybody, other than like, you know, the catering in between sound check and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember drinking beers with Megadeth, you know, drinking beers with the Metallica guys. And I remember Megadeth running out of beer between sound check and the club opening. And one of them went over to the owner to ask for more beer. And this was when Megadeth was just starting out. I mean, they were virtually unknowns. And the owner said to him, Ace gets 2 cases of beer, you get 2 cases of beer. So we really couldn't argue with that, you know. 2 cases of beer was all you got as part of the rider. And even the biggest rock stars got 2 cases of beer. So they couldn't, you know, it was like, okay, whatever. But
Well,
I
that
drank
was
it
fair.
with them more than I ate dinner. So
Jules wants to know the strangest request you've ever gotten from a band who you opened for.
I remember Gene Simmons asking someone, not me directly, but I remember him asking someone to go out and get maraschino cherries at like 3:30 in the morning. So yeah, that was pretty odd, you know, during when the Kiss played the club. So yeah, maraschino cherries at 3:30 in the morning. I mean, you probably could find them somewhere in Manhattan, but I don't know about Brooklyn. I don't know if they ever succeeded. And he ever got his maraschino cherries, but that was a pretty crazy request.
I wonder if that has anything to do with a young lady later that evening.
It's entirely possible. I don't know.
Had to. Why else would you ask for something like that at 3:30 in the morning? That's the only logical explanation.
Imagination.
Exactly.
So yeah, you know, most of the bands that I opened for, I mean, I always had a really good relationship with everybody. They were, you know, back in the day when, you know, like Metallica and Anthrax and all those guys started out, Slayer, but they were younger than me. I have 4 or 5. I'm older than those guys by 5 years, 4 or 5 years. So I saw them as kids. They were 17, 18, 19 years old. I was in my 20s already, or 23 or whatever, playing, you know, working in the club. So, you know, we were friends. So, you know, working together, you know, trying to, you know, put on a show and make sure the crowd gets the best experience that they can get. And so I saw them as friends and coworkers. And everybody was, you know, like really working towards that goal, you know, trying to make the crowd, you know, put on the best show they could. And really at Lemoore, you had to bring your A game because everybody else before you did. You know, you were kind of forced to bring your A game. It was one of those clubs where you had to win the crowd over. So a lot of guys were, you know, they were focused on that. So I had fun working with everybody. It wasn't I never really had any experiences where somebody gave me a hard time. You know, it's like always, all right, how are we going to go about this? What time we're going on? All that kind of stuff was always coordinated very well, and there wasn't a lot of conflict, especially back then. Everybody was working together. None of the bands were slagging each other. They were all trying to help each other out back then. It was just a different world today. But that's the way it was in the 80s.
Brian wants to know the Beatles or Elvis.
I have to say the Beatles, although you know, the Elvis was the king when I was a kid. But when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I was a couple of years old, a toddler. But that was a cathartic moment for me, and it was a cathartic moment for a lot of people. I think that experienced the Beatles live on Ed Sullivan was a life changer for me. That's when music became the most important thing in my life at that moment. And also, I knew that I wanted to play drums. I wanted to do what Ringo was doing. So I became a drummer when I was a young kid. And I wanted to be involved in music, in whichever way that was going to turn out to be. And so, as a young kid, I became a big Beatles fan. And then a couple of years later, when, you know, you go to your friends' birthday parties when you're little, right? Everybody goes to their friends' birthday parties.
Yeah.
You put on the stupid hats and you run around the house and you wreak havoc. I'm the kid in the corner changing the records. That was me. And they were all Beatle records back then because the Beatles were the biggest thing that hit the earth, you know. So, yeah, definitely the Beatles. Although I do love the King, and you know, he was in a class all by himself too.
This is a fun question from Jules. How do you answer it? What band do you think was shitty but got huge?
There's a few of those. I wasn't really impressed with Guns N' Roses when they played the club. I thought they were okay. You know, I didn't think they were gonna, take off like a meteor, but they did, and not long after that either. They did the show at the Ritz. I think it was the night after Lemoore, and that one was filmed for MTV, and that was the one.
I remember that one.
The shot in the arm. Yeah, they did Lemoore like the night before or 2 nights before that. And there weren't as many people at the Lemoore show as there were at the Ritz. So I liked them. I didn't think they were going to become this blockbuster, but that's cool. Nothing wrong with it, more power to them.
Hell, I still wonder how some grunt bands made it. Bands that were shitty but became huge.
Not really big fan of Red Hot Chili Peppers. I like them. As far as the grunge scene, Soundgarden and Alice in Chains are 2 of my favorites, and then Pearl Jam is kind of a close third. Soundgarden has metal elements in it. So does Alice in Chains. They have metal elements in their cauldron, and that's what draws me to them. And they're like, Alice in Chains is like that serious brooding kind of stuff, down in a hole, kind of thing. You gotta identify with that. Anybody who's been kicked around can identify with that kind of stuff, and made their way back from it. And Soundgarden, I was impressed with when they played Lemoore. Actually, it was Voivod, Soundgarden, and Faith No More, 1990. It was an incredible show. It was the last night of the tour.
Oh.
And Soundgarden opened the show. This is back when Chris Cornell was actually playing guitar on some of the songs. This video is also on YouTube. They were extremely impressive. They sounded like a wood chipping machine, just destroying everything in its path. Just shredding everything in its way. I was very impressed with them, and I became a fan that day of Soundgarden. Then they had a tremendous food fight at the end of the show. It was the last show. They sent some runners out to get condiments. They went to the supermarket. They bought mustard, mayonnaise, like whatever, all the stuff, duck sauce. They came back with it. Mike Patton was covered with mustard. It was a scene I'll never forget. And I remember away from Voivod, he said that he had mustard stains on his kit for like a year later after that. He still had mustard stains on his drum set.
Oh my God.
But so Soundgarden, I was blown away by them that night. It's very rare that a band would hit me like the Black Crowes, Soundgarden. Dream Theater was another one. I had no idea really who Dream Theater was. They played the club under the name Majesty first. It was the same lineup. They just changed the name to Dream Theater, and it was the 1990s now had come around. And they had really developed their sound and gelled together. And I was up in the DJ booth, and from their opening notes, I was like, who the hell is that? And I went downstairs, I went to the front. And, another band that impressed me from the get, Dream Theater. So, otherwise, it was really, when the bands were on, I was off. So I was usually by the back bar drinking, trying to max some chick. But, that was the order of the day. But when a band impressed me, I took notice, but there were very few that did that made me stop and pay attention.
How many records would you say you own?
How many? I'm at 25,000 and counting.
Good God. That's awesome.
It's just a fraction. This is the West Wall, what I call the West Wall. There's an East Wall, North Wall, South Wall. So, yeah, somewhere around 25,000 pieces.
Alphabetized?
Some of it is.
Some of it is.
Some of it's alphabetized, yeah. I get new records every day, and then I put them on the shelf, and I'm like, okay, I'll put them in alphabetical order later. Now there's like 40 cubbies of records that I put in and haven't alphabetized yet. It takes a while, but then you got to start shifting. You got to shift once, you got to shift records over. The whole thing is just the domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, just comes from Brian. I hope you never have to move.
Oh yeah, me too. I moved once, and believe me, it was I almost killed myself because I didn't want my movers touching my records, so I moved the records myself, and I damn near killed myself doing it. That'll never happen again. Now I'll let the movers do it. It was an unbelievable back and forth with the van, putting records in crates, taking it out of crates. It was just a pain,
Yeah,
to say the least.
Mm.
So
Now let's talk about writers. Craziest writer request from a band.
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I don't remember any writers being really outrageous. A few extra lights, stuff like that, like sound, extra sound. I don't remember anything that was outrageous in a writer that made me go, "What the hell are they talking about? What are they out of their friggin' minds?" You know. Maybe a massage therapist. Some people had massage therapists coming in, but that was a little odd. I thought, why you're having a show? Why do you want a massage?
Gene.
I seen it. Like that was a little odd. Other than that, I didn't really see anything that was outrageous that I could say was ridiculous, like blue M&Ms.
Right.
The biggest jerk.
Stir it up, Jules.
I don't like to slag people. I don't. But there was one particular drummer from a very famous band, and he was at the bar with this butt ugly chick, and I wanted to. I was going to buy him a drink, and so, but I was standing. I was a couple of people away from him. I went over there, and I went to shake his hand. I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" I put my hand out to shake his hand, and he looked at me like I had three heads, and he just backed away like I had some sort of disease. And I was like, okay, whatever. So yeah, he was a jerk, but I'm not going to say who it is.
That's
No
all right.
problem.
Famous
No
guy,
problem.
very famous.
What band do you like that people would be surprised that you
Band do
like?
I like? There's a few of those. Jules, right? Jules. I'm very impressed with a band called Sister Sparrow and the Dirty Birds. They're like a rock band, but they're more like they have a horn section. There's a little pinch of jazz in there, a little pinch of blues. I'm a big blues fan. So Black Crowes I've seen 35 or 40 times. So that'll give you an idea of what, the other side of the coin, of the metal coin. Huge Black Crowes fan, and Sister Sparrow and the Dirty Birds, to me, sounds like the Black Crowes with a female vocal. The singer, her name is Ollie Kinslow. She's got a really, really special voice, really interesting tone. And so that's something that people would go, I never thought you'd put that record on. But yeah, Sister Sparrow and the Dirty Birds. That's one of my favorites. I'm heavy into blues too, so I like a lot of blues rock. Samantha Fish, stuff like that. So you wouldn't know what to look at me, but blues is a big part of metal anyway. So
Oh yeah.
they're like cousins. So
Yeah, look at Cinderella. They're really blues influenced.
big fan of Oriente. I like her. She's a great guitar player.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I saw that you had her on the Slaughterhouse.
Yeah, I've interviewed her a few times, man. Really sweet. Nice person. And I like PRS guitars too. There's something about PRS guitars. I'm not a guitar player, but I've been around enough guitar players to know a ton about guitars that I really shouldn't know.
Right.
And PRS they don't sound like any other guitar. Just don't. They have a unique tone.
Yeah.
To them, which is, I guess that's hard to do these days when you manufacture guitars.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Nah, right on for sure, man. There's a couple of other bands that I wanted to ask you about that are definitely on different sides of the spectrum. But when you were talking about the food fight, it kind of got me triggered on this band next. So let's talk about monster bands, and let's talk a little bit about Gwar, because they've played Lemurs, and they're known for leaving a trail of destruction in their wake.
Love them, absolutely love them. They did a show at Lemoore. It was, I want to say, it was the early 1990s, Scum Dogs of the Earth kind of thing. There was no album out, but they were just playing all over the place. They weren't supporting any particular record, and I think that's kind of the way Gwar used to be. They used to just play and then put a record out. You know, they did it backwards for a while, but they put a great show on at Lemoore, and those guys are incredible. They got these costumes on, and they don't miss a friggin' beat. Like you're almost. It's more of an artist collective than it is a band, because you have all these people working on the costumes and the props, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and it's all coordinated. And I don't know how they wind up playing a metal concert in the middle of all of that. You know, yeah. I'm not sure how they do it. It's a form of magic, but there's a lot of people involved in that, and it was a lot of fun because it was an election year. So they had the big heads of Bill Clinton, Ross Perot, and I think it was George Bush, I guess, was the other guy. And they brought them out, you know, like the big costumes, big giant heads, and they had like a game show. They were doing like a game show. And Bill Clinton got his question wrong, and they sliced off the top of his head, like blood all over the place. Same thing with Ross Perot. They cut off his ears, they cut off Bush's head. And it was really funny because they were being current, dealing with the current issues of the day, and also being the crazy space alien, outer space beings that they were at the same time. And I went up in the front and got sprayed in my face by, what's the name?
Oh, by Brocky.
Hymenestra. What I forget.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
because David Brocky went by Odorous.
Yeah,
but
I got by the girl in the face. She was spraying her, stuff around.
Right. Do you remember at the end of the show if the staff of Lemoore's was just walking around cleaning, going like, "What the fuck"?
Well, yeah. Well, we had one janitor. His name was Carmine, and he wasn't really happy about the mess that they left behind.
Right.
Not happy at all. But it was a great show. It really was.
Nice. And another band I wanted to ask about that I just thought, I mean, they're just great, and they're just a lot of fun, and that's Stormtroopers of Death.
What's that? Stormtroopers
of Death?
Oh, yeah, the SOD guys. Yeah. Speaking of, yeah. Hey, Alex, what the fuck is that noise? That's like Billy Milano and all those crazy maniacs.
Yeah.
You know the story about how he got, the story, like Milano's not his last name. You know how he got that name? Well, he was working in his factory or something, whatever he was, his day job, whatever he was doing. And there was a vending machine, and he always went and got the Milano cookies. The little, the chocolate cookies. Mm-hmm. And he bought them every day. And one of his coworkers said, they should call you Billy Milano, because all you do is eat these Milano cookies all day long.
Oh my God!
It stuck. The name stuck. That's he was Billy Milano from that day forward.
It's hilarious.
Great band. Today they'd probably catch a lot of flack, for doing the stuff they did. But that material was just pure genius.
Yeah,
pure genius.
Because I mean, it was basically the Fistful of Metal lineup of Anthrax, but with Billy.
Danny started the whole thing, I think. The whole thing rolling, but it was a slice of genius from them, and it was one of these things that they did just on a lark, and they weren't even expecting to play out. They just cut that album as kind of a thing. Let's just do a thing, whatever. Not expecting it to blow up and turn into concerts and tours and the whole thing.
Yeah,
but sure. It's a slice of genius from them. They were great. They played Lemoore maybe half a dozen times at least.
Oh, that's
always
awesome.
A fun night.
And we talked early in the show about CBGBs and L'Amour and stuff like that, but I am under the impression that the Ramones did play L'Amour. Is that correct?
Yes, many times. Many times. Joey told me that he liked playing L'Amour because it was like being in the city, playing in the city without being in the city. Because we had it was, it was a 3,000 cap room. We had a huge stage. We had follow spots. We had a professional lighting trusses. We had a 50,000 watt sound system. And that's why one of the reasons why everybody loved playing there, because the club was the best of the both worlds. You had a concert atmosphere with a huge bar, on the other side of the club. So you had the best of both things. You had a bar plus a concert venue all under one roof. And Joey really loved playing there. The Ramones was another band that sold out every time they played.
Wow.
They probably did a dozen shows, I would imagine, roughly more or less. Sold out every time.
Nice. That's super rad. And before I kick it back up to Angel, one other thing I wanted to ask you that's off the topic of bands, but I'm under the impression that you're working on a book about the history of L'Amour. Is that true? And if it is, can you tell us a little bit about it or what you're allowed to talk about?
It's true. I've been working on it for quite some time. It will eventually see the light of day. There are a couple of things that have to be tied up before that happens. And so that's, that's all I can say at this point, but you will have it in your hands at some point. I can guarantee that.
Nice. Hell yeah, dude. Right on. Angel, right back up to you, bud. You're still muted, buddy.
Yeah, I love this next question. Hair products that you use.
Thanks for hanging out with me, Jules. I use regular, whatever the cheapest shampoo on the shelf is. It's, $6. Okay, that's the one. I'm not sworn to any particular brand. But thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, it's tough to maintain the hair.
It doesn't make sense to me to spend a lot of money on shampoo. It's all soap anyway.
Me neither.
Like a $6 shampoo, $12 shampoo does the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
Yep. What I do is I just let the love of my life deal with my hair. She does whatever the hell she does.
Yeah.
I'll be like, do whatever you do. I trust you. You're not gonna make me go bald anyway.
Right. That's it. It's all good. Yeah, I don't do anything special. I don't have a hairdresser or anything like that.
Oh, really, Brian?
It's overrated. Probably somebody who lost it early. Well, they say there's power in long hair. Isn't that what they say? The story of Samson.
Yep. The only person that would disagree is Steve.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. Metalheads come in all shapes and sizes, man.
Yeah.
And from all life, it's all good. It's a beautiful thing, man.
Oh, yeah.
There's no one way to approach it. Do you have video of that? I would like to see that. I would pay money to see that.
That would be fucking hilarious. I would like to see that too. One other band that I think it'd be kind of cool to hear from you is, so we had Baron Miskaraka on the show a couple of months ago. And he's great. I love Baron to death, and I love Carnivore AD and everything that he's doing. I love his Cemetery Cinema thing that he's doing. Yeah. But we got to talk a lot about Sheer Terror from back in the day. And so, what do you remember about Sheer Terror?
Well, I remember those guys the first time I saw them. They were scary. Like they were really intense, and I just remember this intensity coming from them that was lacking in a lot of other groups. And they were straightforward, hardcore guys, man, that didn't take any prisoners. And I always loved them when they played the club. They played the club quite a few times as a support act and also as headliners. They've done shows with the Cro-Mags at the club a few times. And, they have their own signature sound, which is really tough to do, especially in the hardcore arena. You could say a lot of those bands, there's a lot of similarities in that whole arena. But Sheer Terror's got their own stamp, and that's a really tough thing to do these days.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure. Angel, right back to you, bud.
Again, just fascinated with what was going on in the 80s. Do you have any more stories to share? Just any kind, because I'm crazy back then.
Yeah, I can tell you about one special night. We had Possessed at the club.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Becerra and those guys. I mean, I'm doing 2 shows with them next month. Can't wait. I'll be doing.
Are you doing the one at Reverb, PA?
I'll be doing the Carolina Chainsaw Massacre in North Carolina next week, and then Possessed is coming to Brooklyn with Uada, which I'll be doing. I'll be doing that show at the Meadow. I think it's called the Meadows.
Nice. Uada's awesome. I saw them for the first time at Maryland Death Fest last year, and they blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such a great bunch of guys too, man. Practically, one of the original bands, one of the first death metal bands ever to exist. You got to hand it to them, But they were playing the club one night, and Slayer was walking around in the audience with Rick Rubin. This was right around the time that Slayer and Rick Rubin decided to work together. And a friend of mine, Scott Koenig, Metal Scott, as I mentioned earlier, was very instrumental in getting those Slayer and Rick Rubin together. He knew both parties, and he had a feeling that something good would come out of that. And so he was the catalyst in getting those guys kind of to work together in some way. And they came to the club, and there were rumors going around that they might play. Towards the end of Possessed set, Slayer came up, took their instruments, and did 3 songs off Rain and Blood, which hadn't been released yet. So first time that a crowd had heard stuff from Rain and Blood, which they were still working on. And it was, it was insane. It was insane to have Slayer come up and play 3 songs during a Possessed set. People were going, Slay up for 10 minutes after that. I had to calm them down.
Right.
Possessed went back on and carried on, but it was an awesome surprise. Stuff like that happened more all the time, and it wasn't like nowadays you see stuff like that as pre-planned. A lot of it's staged. But so many people hung out at the club, and so many bands came there to hang and watch other bands that it wasn't unusual for, like, say, Anthrax to jump up and do a song with Iron Maiden, or Anthrax to jump up and do a song with Kiss. Sort of stuff like that happened all the time. An unlikely person. I don't know. Nicolas Cage. I came into the club one night. I don't know how unlikely that is, but I wouldn't expect him to come to Lemoore, but he was there in the crowd. There were a couple of other actors and actresses that would show up now and then, but it wasn't like Studio 54. That's where everybody went back then to hobnob and do coke. Yeah. But I remember Nick Cage being there, and I don't remember if he came to see a band. I think he was related to somebody who was playing. He had a relative, I think it was in a band, and he came to see them. So kind of unlikely, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect that.
Back up to you, Jay.
Yeah, totally. No problem, man. And before we put a little bow on everything and let you enjoy your evening, I'm Alex. Again, we absolutely appreciate your time. But yes, I'm a huge Plasmatics fan, a big Wendy O guy. And you've got to have some stuff that you can say about Wendy O. Williams.
Wendy O was very, very professional, extremely professional, what a sweetheart, man. She treated the whole staff like we were royalty, man. I remember this one particular night, I wasn't working, so I was in the audience. Then she came out and she was swinging around that chainsaw, right? But she was all set to cut this like television set in half. And she was swinging the chainsaw around and she just barely missed the bouncer's head by like a coat of paint. And she realized it, and she was like, "Oh!" After the show was over, she ran over to him, gave him a kiss. "Oh, I'm sorry," like, you know. And she gave him a hug. He's like, "Sorry about that." He was like, "Oh, it's okay," you know. But it was pretty close. I mean, she came pretty close to shaving off the top of his head,
cutting his hair. Oh man, that's awesome, man, for sure.
Yes,
what's up?
I did play at the club. Lemoore had an anniversary show every year. They throw a bash and have all kinds of bands on the stage. And I would form my own group called AKA, the Alex Kayne All-Stars. And but depending on who was there, who I could get together. It was, one year it was Bobby Gustafson on guitar from Overkill, James Lomenzo from White Lion on bass, me on the drums, and a local singer from a band called The Boys. They were on the Lemoore Rocks album. He was the singer, and we did like Train Kept Rolling. We did songs that everybody knew, you know. So we didn't have to jam. It was just jump on the stage and go. So the Alex Kayne All Stars would play on the anniversaries, and it would be different people, you know, from different bands, and we just jam on like Train Kept Rolling or Thank You by Zeppelin, you know, stuff like that. That was easy to bang out. And then I had my own band called Radon. Back when Radon was a thing, you know, you had to search for it under your house or whatever. Mm-hmm. And a female guitar player, the power trio, bassist, and me. And we sounded a lot like Motorhead.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I did have the opportunity to play there from time to time. Always fun.
Oh, that's sick, man, for sure. And let's close it out with a fun guy, with somebody that we all know and love. Let's close it out with King Diamond.
King Diamond, man, forget about it. Okay, so King Diamond comes to the club. We played there a lot, and he liked to come and hang out there. So one night he comes there, no makeup. It's just King Diamond, and he has a girl on each arm. One here, one there. He walks into the club with two girls. And this was another night when Chuck was DJing. I wasn't working, so Lemoore, I was standing by the lobby when he came in. So one of the owners says, "Hey, Alex, stay with him. Make sure nothing happens to him. Just like basically be his bodyguard." So I attached myself to King Diamond. I'm following him around. I escorted him back to the VIP section in the back of the club. There's like tables and chairs back there. And I get a waitress to come over, take his order, his drink order. And so his back is up against the wall. It's like a short wall. That's VIP section is sectioned off. And he's not facing the stage, facing away from the stage. So he's conversing with his two friends. And I'm standing behind him. I'm on the other side of the wall. And I noticed this guy who notices he's King Diamond about to pour his drink down King Diamond's neck, the back of his neck.
What?
Yeah. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. The guy was a moron, I guess, whatever. And he goes to pour the drink, and I grabbed him at the last second. I grabbed him, but you're out, buddy. Escorted him out of the club. King Diamond never knew it happened. When I told him the story about 20 years later, he thanked me. He was like, "Thanks, I appreciate that." Like,
oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I got to see Merciful Fate on their last tour when they came through Fillmore Silver Spring, and I've seen King Diamond a couple of times solo, so it was super, super awesome. Definitely love. We talked earlier about the King, but definitely love that King.
Man, he's great, man. I mean, and you know, what can you say about Dennis Sherman? I mean, you know, what can you say about that era? You know, and the show he just did at the King's Theater in Brooklyn was off the hook. He told me that he quit smoking, and ever since he quit smoking, this was years ago. He quit smoking about 20 years ago. His voice has never been better. He's never felt better, you know, singing. Once he quit smoking, a lot of he was able to vocalize a whole lot better.
Oh, that's awesome. Hell yeah. Angel, any final pop-up questions, brother?
Last one.
My dream show. Man, that's hard to say. You know, it's a tough one. I like, there are so many bands that are like up here, and you know, in my head. I would say, all right, just a few off the top of my head. Pentagram from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Tigers of Pantang with John Sykes in the band. Metallica with Cliff Burton would be in there. Exodus, the original lineup. Uriah Heep, the original guys. It would be a festival, but I probably could name like 12 bands that would be, you know, an ultimate lineup for me. And then the death metal side would have to be Mayhem. What's Hain, one of my favorites. Behemoth, another one of my favorites of all time. Behemoth. There are two bands out of Europe. One's called Unrecalled that I like very much. Atmospheric black metal kind of thing that I've been getting into the past few years. And another band called Fredlos, Fredlos, another atmospheric black metal kind of thing. Those are really, I've been getting into that music lately because it takes you on a journey. You pull your headphones on, close your eyes, and you're in the middle of whatever landscape that band is painted for you. It's almost like a VR experience.
Nice.
So I would say put all those bands together. So half death metal, half new wave of British heavy metal, and that's my ultimate show.
Your dream festival.
Yeah, just for me. I'm in the front. There's nobody else allowed.
Exactly. Just one person in the crowd.
Nah, not really. No, I would love to DJ that and just have everybody come. I would spin. I'd be part.
Hell yeah.
I'd be part of the lineup. That would be ultimate for me.
Oh, that'd be sick, dude, for sure. And Alex, what do you think of the new Metallica album?
I haven't listened to the whole thing yet because I just did an album review for Scorched, the Overkill album, which I like very much.
Oh, nice.
So I like it initially. I have to dig in a little more, let the songs grow on me to really make a judgment on whether I like it or not. But on initial hearing, I like it.
Nice, man.
I really like it. So
Absolutely, man. That's killer, man. Well, dude, Alex, we appreciate you, man. We like you. Thank you so much for rocking out with us for a couple of hours, man. And me and Angel's big thing is that you had a good time and you felt respected and that you, enjoyed your time.
I would say I was fortunate enough back then to be in the right place at the right time. I'm just a really lucky guy to get that spot at the club at that time when everything was brand new. I was able to break a lot of bands. I was able to expand their notoriety and get a lot of bands noticed that weren't noticed, like Queensryche. So I was very, very fortunate to be in that position at that time. And it was really, a lot of it was just luck and the circumstances, already being a DJ, already having metal records. And then it all just fell into place. I'm very lucky. And so I want to thank you guys for spending time with me. I think time is the most precious gift you can give to anybody. So I want to thank you for spending time with me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you as well, man. You're part of the family, man. Anything that you ever need, anything you need for us to push, we are happy to put it out there, man. And, best of luck with the continued work on your book, and just best of luck with all your future ventures, man. We couldn't appreciate you more.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you guys more than you know. I'll see you at a show soon, I'm sure, man. We'll be hanging and banging.
Absolutely, we sure will, man. Definitely. And I'll talk to you soon, my friend. And hit me up anytime.
Thanks to everybody out there that was listening and hanging with us and enjoying the show. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much to Alex Kayne for rocking out with us tonight. Metal Summoners, thank you guys so much. We can't appreciate you guys enough as well. Alex mentioned Kiss. There might be a slight Kiss reference, I think. I think Angel might agree when it comes to next week's guest. But you guys will get to find out about that over the weekend. That show is confirmed, and we will have the announcement come out over the weekend for next week's guest. So have a great rest of your week, everybody. We appreciate you guys. Be good to each other and just have a kick-ass metal weekend, everybody. On behalf of the Metal Summit, for Bobby Dreyer, check him out on BobbyDreyer.com. For Psycho Steve on The Real Psycho Steve on both Facebook and Instagram, Angel Alamo on Facebook and Instagram, and myself, you can catch me at Just a R&R Junkie on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook as well. And make sure that you're following Alex at DJ Alex Kayne and all of his various social medias as well. Keep supporting the scene. We have our music back, and everything's getting back and live, and we're super duper stoked that all of that time has passed. So thank you so much, Metal Summoners. We love you guys. We'll see you in a week. On behalf of the Metal Summit, thank you so much. On behalf of Alex Kayne, thank you so much. As always, you've been watching the Metal Summit.
Rock on.